Hi, Freya. This is Valentina Berruti. I'm a psychotherapist. I'm
Hi.
Italian. I'm doing this interview from Italy. And I would like to know if you agree if I record this interview.
Yes, that's fine.
So, Freya, thank you so much. I
Mhm.
read on your Instagram there that you are a donor conceived person. And
Yes.
I would like to know how old are you and in brief your story.
Yes, of course. I'm 30 years old. And yeah, I'm donor conceived. So I have two mums. They conceived me through a clinic in London, in the 90s, early 90s. And yeah, it was an anonymous donor because that's how the laws worked in England at the time. Yeah.
And so, about your mom, your mom, they said to you the truth since the beginning, I believe, and
Yes.
how they did.
So I have no real memory of one conversation. It was so um, early on, it was so normal, just part of our story that I don't remember not knowing. I just always did.
Yeah, and
Mm.
it was a sperm donation, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And when you know, uh, you are a donor conceived people, when you had the relationship with other people or that were conceived in a traditional way,
Yeah.
when you were a child, or did you feel different in some kind of way?
No, never. I kind of didn't really think much about it when I was younger. It was sometimes an interesting fact about myself if I was sort of meeting new people. But I didn't think much about it. I had two very loving parents, so I didn't feel like I was missing anything. And my curiosity probably only started when I was a teenager.
Mm.
And then I only really did anything about it when I was in my 20s. So growing up, it wasn't something that I really thought much about.
Yeah. And what do you think about anonymity, about the donors? You know, there is some country where you can have an open donor or
Mm,
whatever. And for some parents, heterosexual couples, it's very hard also to make a decision about in what country we should go to make the best decision. What do you
yeah.
think about the anonymity or non-anonymity of the donors?
I don't think it's ethical to have totally anonymous donors. That was so my donor was totally anonymous. And whilst it didn't upset me growing up, it wasn't an issue. I knew that he was anonymous. My parents were very clear that I wasn't going to be able to find him because we didn't know about DNA testing back then. And I wasn't that fussed. It made it quite hard to picture who he was in my head. So if anyone did ask me questions about, where I came from, I did find that quite tricky just to imagine him. Um, but I don't think now, with the options that we have and the knowledge we have about the psychological effect it can have on people, I don't think that total anonymity is ethical now.
Okay. I would like to ask you some advice because, I work in Italy where
Mhm.
the IVF with donation is legal since 2014.
Yeah,
So, by psychological point of view, is very new.
yeah,
Um, as I was saying before, many infertile couples would prefer to avoid saying the truth
mm,
when they decide to do IVF with donation to their child and because they are afraid to hurt their child.
mm.
What would you like to say to them? What is your advice as a donor conceived person?
I think anytime I talk to people about telling their children that they're donor conceived, I always say that honesty as early as possible is the easiest, purely because having conversations with a child is actually so much easier than having those conversations later down the line with a teenager or an adult,
Mhm.
because there is that fact that you have lied for however many years. And it takes away, if when they're a child, it's easy to have those conversations because it makes sense to them more so because they just trust that what we're explaining to them makes sense. we think that they will struggle to understand it when they're small, and we think those conversations are too big. Lots of people are scared that their children will then decide that they aren't really their parents because of
Yeah,
that. But children don't think like that. If they've got two parents that are there raising them and loving them every day, they don't realize that they don't turn around and say, well, you're not my parent anymore. It's a very big fear, and I know a lot of parents have it. But actually, all the people that I've met that are donor conceived, if they've been told early on, they have not grown up with issues. If they found out in their 20s or 30s, they have had a lot of rupture and problems to understand that and understand their parents at that point. That's been much harder. So I
yeah,
think it's driven by fear, and I understand that, and I understand it must be scary, but it's trusting that you are a parent even if there's no genetic link. You're doing all of the hard work, you're raising them, you're the one that they adore and that they go to for bedtime stories and things. You're a parent. Just because there isn't that genetic link, that's
yeah,
not the final say on who is a parent.
yeah. I think that when you were a child, maybe somebody asked you if the genetical bond has a kind of difference for you. I
Mm.
mean, with your parents,
Yeah.
you know, what if there is any difference with the parent with who you don't have a genetical bond or
So if
not?
anything, I grew up actually closer to my non-biological mum. We just, in terms of getting on, I got on better with her.
Yeah.
We've been closer as we grew up. I look very much like my biological mum, but actually, personality wise, I have always been very similar to my non-biological mum. She's my best friend. She always has been. There's absolutely no genetic link there. There's not even a legal link because she didn't adopt me, but
Mm.
she is my best friend. Even now I'm
Mm.
30 and I call her every day for any problem I have. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's absolutely no difference there.
Yeah. Why you think there is this prejudice about the genetical connection? About the psychological point of view, I think is a question of identity.
Mm,
Sometimes when you are infertile, it wasn't the case of your family, but usually with infertile couples, there is a kind of attack to their identity. So
mm,
they believe that the genetical connection is a kind of legitimacy to be parent. But
mm,
usually you are parent because you wish. It's something that starts from yourself, not
yeah,
from something which is outside of you, like the genetical connection, which is, an idea that is
yeah,
something outside of you that give you the legitimacy. What do you think about that? Why there is this prejudice about this importance about the genetical
yeah.
connection?
I think it's the easiest thing that people see when it comes to parenting. They go, oh, well, it's your mum and dad and it's part of you. But I think that's such it's as a English phrase, but it's a cop out. It's so easy to just say, yeah, they're your parents because you're related to them. The people that are parents with no genetic link have put way more into it and are showing that it isn't just as easy as creating a baby the traditional way. Anyone can do that as such. Any person could do that and not then raise a child and raise
Yeah,
them to be an amazing person. um and now that I'm a parent, and me and my wife also used a donor, so we have continued that. And my wife is the non-biological mum,
yeah,
and I watch my kids. they are our kids are obsessed with her. Like, they think she's the best thing in the world. They have no clue that at the moment they're too young to know that she is not actually biologically related to them. They don't care. There's
they
no
don't care.
part of them that care. Like, that's their mum, and I think we as adults put a lot of, especially people that have gone through fertility treatment, because it's so grueling and it's so hard, that people start to think, it's my fault, and then it comes all of this heaviness with
Yeah,
infertility and things like that, when in reality, when there is a child in front of you, they do not care. They
Yeah.
obviously, as they get older, there might be things where they can do the sort of genetic mirroring, and that's very important, being able to see someone that looks like you. But actually, that's quite a small part of what makes up a family and those connections that have started way before a child understands whether they're biologically related to you or not.
Yeah.
Mm.
I have another question regarding the donor. Have you never had the wish to know the donor or to find him?
I found him. I have
Ah,
found him.
okay.
So I never set out to find him. I didn't really want to. I was very interested in half siblings. I found that really cool. And my mum's talked a lot about half siblings because we knew that that was possible. At 18, the way that the UK works, even when it was anonymous, at 18 you could connect with half siblings. But
Okay.
obviously, all the people, you had to opt into it, you had to choose to do it. So when I signed up, nobody else had.
Ah,
So I had to wait a while. And then I have made some connections with half siblings. But I did one of the DNA tests years and years ago in the hopes that I might find some siblings. And I didn't find any. But I ended up connecting with a second cousin. And then that second cousin had done a lot of digging of their own family tree. And so when she was asking me where I come from and you know, why what might we be linked? And I explained I'm donor conceived. She said, "Oh, I'm going to go do some digging." And she came back and said, "I think I know who your biological father is." And it was just a pure hunch. She just guessed it was going to be this relative that she had. She sent him one of the DNA tests and it came back as a paternal match. So there was no, I didn't go into it wanting to or expecting to find
yeah.
him. And yeah, we've now got, we met in 2020, so nearly 5 years of knowing each other. And it's been lovely. It wasn't expected, and I didn't really think that was ever going to be something I'd have, but it's been really nice having a lot of answers that I didn't think I'd get. And just being able to know him and know who he is. And we have phone calls and we've met up a couple of times. So yeah, it's been a nice bonus. I'd never really expected it. So yeah.
Yeah. And who is the donor for you? How you would like to, you know, what would you like to say about him? Who is for
So
you?
yeah, so he's sort of, sometimes when I tell people that I found him, they'll start saying, "Oh, your dad." And I go, he's not my dad." Like, I
Yeah.
think it makes sense to people in their heads. And now that they think, well, now you know him, surely he is your dad. I'm like, no, he's potentially biological father. That's maybe as far as I'd go in terms of that sort of label. I still talk about him as the donor to other people. Obviously, now he has a name, so I'll just use his name. um, I guess to me, it's like he's a relative. It's like he's a
Mm.
member of my family,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't see him as a parent. Again, I've got two parents. I didn't really need another one. But he's sort of, it's like having, I guess, a member of the family there.
Yeah.
So I know we're related and I know that we've got that link, but it doesn't really, yeah, it doesn't go closer than that in terms of connection. But he's a lovely guy. It's been really nice knowing him, and he's got his own kids, so it opens up a few doors of I've got more half siblings I didn't realize I had. Um, so yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And who are for you the half siblings?
So yeah, I call them my half siblings. There's 15 of us in our half
How
sibling
many?
pod. 15.
Oh, a
So
lot.
yeah. So yeah, me and my sister are whole siblings. So we have the same donor and then the same mom carried us both. Um, and then we found five so far of our half siblings. And I don't know if we'll find any more, really. I think the only reason we found those siblings has either been through the DNA test that I've done or the UK HFEA, the sort of the
Yeah.
body of donor exception.
Yeah, I know.
Their sibling link has been the main way that we found siblings as well.
Mhm.
But I feel like now the youngest of us is my sister, and she's 26. And so if they have no one else has signed up yet, there's a part of me going, I think they probably don't know. I think there's a case that actually the rest of them might not know.
Mhm.
So it might be they pop up on DNA tests over the years. That feels quite unsettling. I don't like that. I don't know when I'll find them. but I love knowing them. Again, I'm quite close to two of them. My half sister, I was a bridesmaid at her wedding, so
Yeah.
we sort of, but we kind of worked at that. We've had to build up a
Mm.
relationship. It didn't come naturally. Um, and in the end, they're kind of the ones that I'm not that close to. It's just nice knowing that they're there, but they don't go any further than being kind of my half siblings. But yeah, again, I kind of just like to know that they're there and I can ask those questions if I need it. It's lovely having that. Even medical stuff, that's been a highlight,
Yeah.
being able to ask someone if they share the same weird medical thing. That's been useful. Uh,
Yeah. Um, I have another question.
mhm,
Many recipient parents, they don't accept that their daughter or son could decide one day to know the donor.
mm,
Mm? They believe that they're afraid about that.
yeah,
What would you like to say to them about this fear?
yeah. I think whenever I've spoken to people that have those fears, I always say that it's not like when you have a second child. You might have the worry that you're not going to have enough love for another child. You love your first child so much, and then you have another child, and your heart expands for that. It
Yeah.
doesn't it doesn't split, it expands. And I have two parents that I love a lot. And when I met my donor and I got to see him and I got to know him, it wasn't that I then had to divide where my
Yeah.
love went. It just expanded to fit him in to
Mm-hmm.
me and my family. And my non-biological mom has met him, and they sat in a room and had tea together. and
Yeah.
and afterwards I said to her, like, what was that like? And she said it was weird, it was really strange, but I've been picturing him for all these years. And it was so nice to get to actually see him and almost thank him because he'd given us you. And so I think the fear that people have is that it's got to be one or the other, that if people want to know the donor, they can't possibly love their parents. And it's just not true. I've never met a single donor conceived person that meets the donor and suddenly decides, I don't love my parents anymore.
Yeah.
Um, and it's all it does is maybe it can be as simple as it ticks off a few boxes and answers some questions, or they have an amazing friendship with this donor and it's just someone else to love, it's someone else in their family. Um, and I think that give yourself more credit as a recipient parent. All of that work and all that parenting you're doing, raising a child, doesn't disappear the second that potentially, a donor appears. But also, if your child is interested in wanting to know the donor or is interested in that biological side, it doesn't mean you've failed, um, because that natural curiosity is super normal, just purely from a genetic point of view. We always do family tree stuff at school. Everyone looks at their history and their ancestors. Um, Generally, it's just curiosity, and
Yeah.
the only reason that would ever get sort of worse is if it's squashed down. If and
Yeah.
a parent goes, no, you're not allowed to, that's going to make it worse because it's someone then sitting with, well, I'm now being told that I'm not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
And we always know with teenagers that doesn't go down well anyway. So um, I love to say, just embrace it with them. If they're curious, be curious with them.
Yeah.
Um, you might not have the answers. If it is an anonymous donor, you won't have the answers. But if your child is wondering about it, go, yeah, I do wonder that, and maybe one day we'll find out, and that sounds really cool. And then your child can bond with you even more because they've
Yeah.
got a shared person to do that with. So yeah,
Well, I believe that parents should support their child, about
yeah,
their wish, because it's not, there is no meaning of the legitimacy, their
yeah,
parents, no?
yeah.
So, what would you like to say to parents that have a child, they have, some
Mm.
child with a donation? What are the most important things that they should know? How to raise them or whatever. What advice you would like to say to them?
I would say, in terms of telling them, start early,
Mm,
because one of the best ways I tend to say is to use things like books I don't know what's available in Italian, but I know that in
Yeah,
English we've got several that are sort of aimed at quite young ages.
yeah,
And the bonus of them, and the reason I say start young, is because it's just for you, really. You're practicing how to say
yeah.
it and what's comfortable. And then by the time they're old enough to understand that, you're comfortable with it.
Hmm.
Because a child picks up on when we're feeling a bit like this isn't
Hmm.
particularly easy to say. So yeah, start young. Don't make it that it's a sort of big thing, in terms of you don't have to sit down at the dinner table and have a really important conversation. It can be as casual as sort of mentioning like, oh yeah, your hair is really curly and that's not from me. Like that absolutely must be from the donor. And that can be it for the day. Like it doesn't have to be heavy and scary. And know that your child is never, we never know what your child will feel. We
Yeah,
like to think we'll know and we like to guess, but actually, us as parents and our children, we are never going to be exactly the same. Our kids can be total opposites of us.
yeah, it's true.
Um, and if that's the case, you've just raised a really confident, independent kid. So we want that. You want a child that has their own view. So don't try and guess how they'll feel about the donor or what they'll want to do in the future, and just go with it. What they decide and what they think, support them and show them that you're there. And if they need help, you'll help. And if not, you'll just sit there and support them from the background. Yeah, I think that's probably the most important.
Well, thank you. I would like to ask you one the last things, and it's very hard because what would you like to say to recipient parents that they are so strict and they say, I don't want to say the truth, I want to avoid to say that they are donor conceived. What would you like to say to them?
I think on a really practical level, you are setting your children up for quite a scary future. If even if they emotionally are fine, there's the physical worry of half siblings. There's the worry that they could potentially meet and have children with someone that they're related to. If you're not arming them with all the knowledge that you can have, then you are putting them at risk. And medically wise as well, if they're going around giving half of their medical history as something that is not theirs, you're setting them up with risk. And and it might seem emotionally easier right now to do that, but your child is going to be more than a baby for the
Yeah,
rest of their life. And once they hit those years, it's way harder to have a conversation. A lot of people seem to say to me, "Oh, we'll tell them later. We'll tell them when they're able to understand." But actually, that gets harder and harder. The older they
yeah,
get, that gets harder and harder. So don't tell yourself that it will be easier to do it when they're 15. It won't. But yeah, I think the incest thing is the biggest fear for me. I think we have to be realistic about the fact that if we're using a donor, we do not know how many half siblings are out there. I like
yeah,
to think that I have 15, but I don't know. And then I don't know what, 8, 9 of them. I've never met them. I don't know who they are. And even I'm armed with the knowledge that I am donor conceived, but I don't know. I still don't know who these people are.
yeah.
And if your child isn't aware that that might be something they need to be aware of and sort of take precautions with, um, they're at risk. So yeah,
Yeah. So, Freya, thank you so much for this interview. I've
thank you.
never met an Italian donor conceived person.
I don't think so. I was thinking about this, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
So no,
So let me know if you know, because
I
I
will.
found like six Italian adults, because we know we
Yeah,
have lots, but they are still young.
yeah,
But keep in touch and thank you
yeah.
so much for your interview. I'm going to stop the recording, but
Okay,
please stay 1 second more. Thank you
sure.
so much. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Mhm.